After my son's funeral, I decided to test my daughter-in-law by hiding the fact that he left me $2.6 million. Ryan died suddenly at 28, and Victoria was devastated. Perfect wife, perfect grief, perfect widow. But something felt off about the way she immediately started asking about practical matters while we were still planning the service. "Dad," she said the day after we buried him, "I know this is hard, but we need to think about finances." Ryan never talked much about money with me. "Do you know if he had any savings? Any assets we need to deal with?" I told her I'd handle everything. Told her not to worry about money right now, that grief was more important than paperwork. But I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her Ryan owned half of Rogers Automotive, worth $1.2 million. Didn't mention the life insurance policy naming me as beneficiary. Didn't bring up the investment accounts, the property, the carefully planned estate that my financially savvy son had built over 10 years. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that subscribe button and let me know what state you're listening from. Because what I discovered about my daughter-in-law changed everything I thought I knew about the people we trust most. Ryan and I had been partners in the garage business since he graduated college. Smart kid, head for numbers, understood that building wealth meant thinking long-term. When he married Victoria 8 months ago, I was thrilled. She seemed perfect for him, caring, supportive, the kind of woman who'd make him happy. But perfect people sometimes hide imperfect secrets. The first red flag came during the funeral lunch. While I was talking to relatives, I overheard Victoria on the phone in the hallway. Not grief, not arrangements, business. "No, I can't give you an answer yet," she was saying. "I need to figure out what he left behind first. Give me 2 weeks." When I asked who she'd been talking to, she said it was her employer. Understanding about time off. Reasonable explanation. But something about her tone bothered me. So I made a decision that probably saved my life. I decided to let Victoria believe Ryan had died nearly broke. Told her the garage was struggling, that we'd been living paycheck to paycheck, that there might not be much inheritance to worry about. Watched carefully to see how she'd react to marrying a man who left her nothing. What happened over the next 2 weeks revealed a side of my daughter-in-law I never could have imagined. And thank God I discovered it before she decided I wasn't useful to her anymore. Because the woman I thought was grieving my son's death was actually calculating my own. Let me back up and tell you about Victoria Sterling, or the woman who called herself that. She met Ryan at a coffee shop in February. "Classic meet cute," she called it later. She was struggling with her laptop. He offered to help. One thing led to another. By March, they were inseparable. By June, engaged. August wedding, small ceremony. Just me, her, and a few friends. Should have been my first red flag. A woman with no family, no history, no one who'd known her longer than 5 minutes. But Ryan was happy. Happier than I'd seen him since his mother passed. Victoria was beautiful, charming, attentive. She listened to his stories about rebuilding engines like they were poetry. Called me dad from week 3. Cooked Sunday dinners, brought flowers to Anna's grave, fit into our lives like she'd been custom made for the empty spaces. That was the problem. She fit too perfectly. Rogers Automotive sits on 2 acres in Bellevue, Washington. The garage itself is worth maybe $800,000, but the land underneath, that's where the real money is. Prime commercial real estate, bought cheap in 2009 when nobody wanted anything. I've had developers calling twice a week for 3 years wanting to build condos. My house sits on another acre next door, paid off, worth around $1.2 million in today's market. Then there's my savings, $820,000 in a Wells Fargo account, plus $180,000 in checking. The life insurance policy is smaller, just $350,000, but it adds up. Ryan knew all this. He'd been handling the books since he got out of community college, helped me navigate the tax stuff, understood the business inside and out. Kid had a head for numbers that would have made his mother proud. What he didn't have was a head for con artists. Victoria never asked about money directly, too smart for that. But she had a way of steering conversations, mentioning articles she'd read about estate planning, wondering aloud about what happened to family businesses when the owners got older, Casual questions about whether Ryan had life insurance, whether I'd thought about retirement. Normal questions for a new daughter-in-law, right? Except for the way she remembered every detail. The way she'd follow up weeks later with more specific inquiries. The way she'd started volunteering to help with the garage's bookkeeping. I should have trusted my gut. But grief makes you grateful for any kindness, and Victoria was nothing if not kind. She was there when I couldn't sleep, making coffee at 2 a.m. while I told stories about Ryan as a kid. She was there when I couldn't face the insurance paperwork, offering to handle the phone calls. She was there with casseroles and sympathy and a shoulder to cry on. She was always there. Ryan started acting different in July, quiet, distracted. Spent more time on his computer, less time talking. When I asked what was wrong, he'd say, work stress. When Victoria asked, he'd say nothing at all. But I caught him watching her sometimes when she wasn't looking. The way you watch something you're trying to figure out. That's when he started learning computer forensics. Thought I didn't notice, but I did. Online courses, YouTube tutorials, books about digital investigation. Said it was for fun, maybe a career change someday. But I've seen that look before, in the Navy, when we were trying to solve a problem that could get people killed. Ryan wasn't learning computer forensics for fun. He was building a case. The last real conversation we had was August 28th, 6 days before he died. We were closing up the garage, just the two of us. Victoria had gone to visit her mother, or so she said. Ryan looked at me for a long time, like he was trying to decide something. "Dad," he said finally, "if something ever happened to me, who would inherit the business?" I told him it would go to Victoria, then to any kids they might have, then to him if he survived her. Standard stuff. But his face went white. "What if we didn't have kids?" he asked. "What if something happened to both of us?" That's when I knew he was scared. Not worried, not stressed. Scared. My son, who'd never backed down from anything in his life, was genuinely afraid of something. "Ryan," I said, "what's going on?" He looked around the garage, at the tools his grandfather had passed down, at the customer photos on the walls, at 15 years of our lives, built into that space. Then he looked at me. "Just make sure you check everything before you sign anything. Okay, Dad? Promise me." I promised. Wished to God I'd pressed harder, demanded answers. But parents don't expect their children to die. We expect time to fix things, time to figure out what's wrong, time for one more conversation that explains everything. Ryan died before we could have that conversation, but he left me something better than an explanation. Victoria's reaction to the news was textbook grief. Hysteria, then numbness, then a kind of desperate clinging to routine. She insisted on handling the funeral arrangements, said it would help her process. Picked the flowers, wrote the obituary, chose the music, did everything right. Except for one small detail I caught during the viewing. While people were paying their respects, while she was accepting condolences and playing the devastated widow, I saw her slip into the bathroom. When she came out 2 minutes later, her mascara was perfect again, but I heard her making a phone call through the door. Couldn't catch the words, but the tone was all wrong. Not grief, not shock, relief. That's when I found the hidden text message that made me want to call the police immediately. Ryan's phone was still on his nightstand when I went to collect his things. Victoria had offered to handle it, said she'd transfer everything important and cancel the service. But something about the way she offered, too eager, too quick, made me want to do it myself. Smart thing I ever did. The text was in his drafts folder, started but never sent. Just one line. "Dad, if something happens to me, check Victoria's real name." But when I scrolled up through their message history, I found something else. Screenshots. Bank statements. Photo after photo of documents I'd never seen before. Spreadsheets with names and dates and dollar amounts. And one picture that made my hands shake. Victoria's driver's license. Washington State. Issued 2019. Except the name wasn't Victoria Sterling. It was Rebecca Martinez. Different birthday, different address, different everything. The woman I'd been calling my daughter-in-law for 8 months was living under a completely fabricated identity. I sat in Ryan's bedroom for an hour, going through every screenshot, every document, every piece of digital evidence my son had collected. Bank records from 3 different states, marriage certificates from Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, death certificates for 3 different men, all between the ages of 55 and 68, all ruled natural causes, all leaving substantial inheritances to their surviving spouses, all married to women who looked exactly like Victoria. Rebecca Martinez in Phoenix, Victoria Westbrook in Las Vegas, Sarah Coleman in Dallas. Same face, same smile, same story. Widowed young, looking for love again. Found it with lonely men who owned businesses, properties, had life insurance policies worth killing for. Ryan had been investigating her for 2 months, following a trail of fake identities and convenient deaths across 4 states, building a case that would have sent her away for life, if he'd lived long enough to present it. I called Janet Morrison at 11 p.m. that Thursday night. Woke her up, didn't care. Janet's been my attorney since I bought the garage, helped me navigate Anna's death, knew every detail of my finances and family situation. Janet, I said, I need you to freeze every asset I own. Tonight. Grayson, My son didn't die in an accident. His wife killed him, and she's coming for me next. Silence on the other end. Then, do you have proof? I told her about the phone, the screenshots, the trail of identities. Told her about Ryan's behavior in the weeks before he died, about Victoria's phone call at the funeral, about the way she'd been positioning herself to handle all his affairs. How much time do we have? Janet asked. She thinks I'm grieving and helpless. Maybe a week before she starts by pushing for access to accounts. Maybe less. I'll file an emergency petition first thing tomorrow. Suspicious circumstances, possible elder fraud. We can get a temporary freeze on everything while we investigate. But Grayson, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. I wasn't. Every instinct I'd developed over 59 years was screaming danger. The same instincts that had kept me alive in the Navy, that had helped me build a successful business from nothing, that had always known when something was too good to be true. Victoria Sterling was too good to be true. Friday morning, she called. Sweet voice, concerned tone. Dad, I was thinking we should meet with a lawyer today. Get started on the probate process. I know it's hard, but the sooner we handle this... Of course, I said. But let's wait a few days. I'm not ready to deal with all that yet. I understand, but there are deadlines we have to meet. Insurance claims, bank notifications. I can handle most of it if you'd like. The eagerness was back. The helpful daughter-in-law taking care of everything. Except now I knew why she was so eager to help. Victoria, I said, can I ask you something? Anything. Ryan mentioned you had family in California. Your mother, I think. I'd like to meet them. Thought maybe we could all have dinner once things settle down. Pause. Just a heartbeat. But I heard it. Oh, She's not well enough for visitors right now. Maybe later. Of course. What about your father, your siblings? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm pretty much alone in the world now, just like you. That's when I knew for certain. Because real name wasn't Victoria Sterling, and she wasn't alone in the world at all. Marcus Bennett's report arrived Saturday morning. 3 pages of information that confirmed my worst fears and added a few new nightmares I hadn't considered. Victoria Sterling didn't exist before 2019. No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history, no social media presence older than 4 years. The woman who'd married my son was a ghost with a brand new life story. But Rebecca Martinez had existed. Phoenix PD had a file on her, though she'd never been charged. Married to William Martinez, 62, owner of an auto parts chain. He died in 2018, sudden heart attack, left her everything. Natural causes, case closed. She inherited $1.8 million and disappeared 6 months later. Before that, she was Victoria Westbrook in Las Vegas. Married to James Westbrook, 58, casino security supervisor. Died of a stroke in 2017, left her $900,000 in life insurance and property. Natural causes, case closed. Before that, Sarah Coleman in Dallas. Married to Robert Coleman, 61, oil field supervisor. Died in 2016. Complications from diabetes. Left her 1.2 million. Natural causes. Case closed. 3 husbands. 3 convenient deaths. 3 substantial inheritances. And each time she'd waited exactly the right amount of time. Not too short to look suspicious. Not too long to seem uninterested. Before moving on to the next target. My son had figured this out. That's why he'd been learning computer forensics. That's why he'd been asking about inheritance laws. He'd discovered he was married to a serial killer, and he'd been trying to build a case strong enough to stop her. But she'd stopped him first. Marcus had more. Bank records showing large cash deposits in all 3 cities, always months before the husbands died. Money transferred from accounts belonging to elderly men who died alone, no next of kin. No investigations. She wasn't just a black widow. She was a one-woman crime spree, targeting anyone with assets and limited family. "There's something else," Marcus said when he called. The pattern's accelerating. William Martinez died 14 months after marriage. James Westbrook died 11 months after. Robert Coleman died 8 months after. She married your son in August. He died 8 months later. She's getting impatient. Or better at it. Grayson, this woman is a professional. The kind of professional who's been doing this for years, maybe decades. We might be looking at the tip of the iceberg. That afternoon, Victoria called again. This time she was worried about bills, about keeping the business running, about making sure I didn't lose everything while grieving. She had a solution, of course. She'd found a lawyer who specialized in estate planning, someone who could expedite the probate process. "His name is David Chen," she said. "He's handled cases like this before. Knows how to work with insurance companies, how to minimize tax implications. I already made us an appointment for Monday." I'd never heard of David Chen. Neither had Janet Morrison when I called to check. "Grayson," Janet said, "there's no estate attorney named David Chen in King County. I ran the Bar Association database twice." That's when I understood the scope of what I was dealing with. Victoria wasn't working alone. She had helpers, accomplices, a whole network of people ready to play whatever role she needed. Fake lawyer, fake mother, fake friends. An entire fabricated support system designed to legitimize her presence in victims' lives. Sunday, she invited me to dinner. Her treat, she said. Wanted to cook for me the way she used to cook for Ryan. But when I got there, I found something that made my skin crawl. She'd redecorated. Not everything, just small things. A different throw pillow on the couch, new flowers on the kitchen table, a painting I'd never seen before hanging in the hallway, like she was slowly erasing Ryan's presence, replacing his choices with her own. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing me looking around. "I just thought the place needed some updating. Ryan always said he wanted to redecorate, but never had time." Ryan had never said that. Ryan loved our house exactly the way it was, exactly the way his mother had arranged it, but Victoria was already making it hers, already establishing ownership. During dinner, she brought up the business again. Casual conversation, concerned questions. Had I thought about what would happen to Rogers Automotive if something happened to me? Did I have a succession plan? What about life insurance? "I know it's morbid to think about," she said, cutting her chicken with surgical precision, "but Ryan would want me to make sure you're protected. You've worked so hard to build something valuable." She knew exactly how valuable. Knew about the property values, the business income, the insurance policies. Information I'd never shared with her. Information Ryan wouldn't have discussed with a new wife, unless she'd gone looking for it. "Victoria," I said, watching her face carefully, "how did you and Ryan meet? I mean, what were you doing at that coffee shop that day?" "Just working on my laptop. Freelance design work. My client had sent revisions that weren't opening properly." "What kind of design work?" Hesitation. Just a flicker, but I caught it. "Marketing materials, websites, nothing too exciting." "Which company?" Another flicker. "They're based in California. Small firm. You probably haven't heard of them." I smiled and changed the subject. But I made a mental note. Victoria Sterling had never mentioned having clients in California before. In 8 months of conversation, she'd never once discussed her work, her income, her professional life. Because freelance designers keep records, file taxes, have portfolios and references and professional histories. Victoria Sterling had none of that. But I was beginning to think she was planning to marry me in 6 months, just like Marcus had predicted. Monday morning, I met with Janet Morrison at 8 a.m. By 9:15, we'd filed an emergency petition to freeze all my assets under Washington State's Elder Fraud Protection Statute. By 10:30, every account I owned was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Wells Fargo called at 11 to confirm the freeze. The property management company called at noon. My insurance agent called at 1 p.m. By 2 o'clock, Victoria Sterling couldn't access a dime of my money, even if I begged them to let her. Step 1 complete. Step 2 required more delicate timing. I need you to call me at exactly 3:47 this afternoon, I told Janet. I'm going to be with Victoria, and I need her to hear specific information. What kind of information? The kind that makes her panic enough to make mistakes. Janet Morrison has been practicing law for 28 years. She knows a trap when she hears one being set. Grayson, what are you planning? Justice for my son, and protection for the next target she was planning to marry. At 3:30, I was sitting in Victoria's living room, my son's living room, drinking coffee and listening to her explain why we needed to move quickly on the estate planning. David Chen says the longer we wait, the more complicated things get, she was saying. There are tax implications, insurance deadlines. If we file the paperwork this week, we can have everything settled by November. That seems fast. It's actually normal for cases like this, especially when the beneficiary structure is straightforward. She leaned forward, concerned and helpful. I know you're still grieving, Dad, but Ryan would want us to handle this responsibly. My phone rang at 3:47 exactly. Sorry, I told Victoria. It's my lawyer. I answered on speaker, loud enough for her to hear every word. Grayson, I have good news and bad news. Janet's voice filled the room. The good news is the asset freeze went through. Every account is protected. The bad news is the IRS audit flag just triggered. They're reviewing all transactions from the past 3 years. Victoria's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. What does that mean? I asked, playing my part. It means nothing moves until they complete their investigation. No transfers, no probate distributions, no insurance payouts. We're looking at 6 to 9 months minimum before you can access any of your assets. I watched Victoria's face cycle through surprise, concern, and something that looked like calculation. Is that normal? I asked Janet. Unfortunately, yes. Estate freezes automatically trigger audit protocols for accounts over $2 million. It's designed to prevent fraud, but it makes everything more complicated for legitimate beneficiaries. Victoria set down her cup very carefully. After I hung up, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, I had no idea your estate was that large. Interesting, she was supposed to be grieving my son, not calculating my net worth. Most of it's tied up in property and business assets, I said. Nothing liquid. Still, 6 to 9 months seems excessive. Janet says there's nothing we can do about it. But Victoria Sterling clearly had different ideas, because Tuesday morning she called with a solution. I've been thinking about your situation, she said. The asset freeze, the audit, all of it. I might know someone who can help. What kind of help? My mother has a friend who works for the IRS, regional office in Portland. Maybe she could put in a word, expedite the review process. There it was, the first crack in her perfect facade. I thought your mother was too sick for visitors. She is, but she's not too sick to make phone calls. Family connections, you know? I knew all right. I knew Victoria's mother was probably another member of her crew, ready to play whatever role the scam required. IRS employee, medical professional, helpful neighbor, whatever it took to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. That's very thoughtful, I said, but I'd hate to impose. It's no imposition. Mom wants to help. She feels terrible about what happened to Ryan, wants to do something for the family. The family. As if we were all one big happy unit, instead of a predator, circling her wounded prey. Actually, Victoria continued, she was wondering if you'd like to meet her. She's feeling a little better today, thought maybe we could have coffee. Nothing formal, just a chance to connect. Perfect. I needed to see the rest of Victoria's operation in action. I'd love that, I said. Where would be convenient for her? There's a little cafe near the hospital where she's been getting treatments. Quiet place, easy parking. How about Thursday afternoon? Thursday afternoon, I sat in Pacific Coffee Roasters on Pine Street, waiting to meet Victoria's dying mother. Victoria arrived first, looking appropriately worried. 10 minutes later, an elderly woman in a wheelchair rolled through the door. Margaret Sterling looked exactly like a cancer patient should look. Thin, pale, oxygen tank, brave smile. The performance was flawless. "You must be Grayson," she said, voice weak but warm. "Victoria's told me so much about you." We talked for 45 minutes. Margaret shared stories about Victoria's childhood, expressed sympathy for my loss, worried about how the kids were holding up. She was grandmother perfect, wise, caring, appropriately fragile. She was also the same woman I'd seen loading heavy boxes into a truck outside Victoria's house the week before. "The treatments are expensive," Margaret said at one point, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Insurance only covers so much, but we're managing." "How expensive?" I asked. Victoria jumped in quickly. "Mom, you don't need to burden Dad with $50,000 for the experimental therapy," Margaret said. "But it's working. The doctors are optimistic." $50,000. Exactly the amount Victoria would need to disappear if the inheritance scam fell through. Exactly the amount that would trigger my protective instincts while seeming reasonable enough to pay quickly. "Mom," I said, reaching across the table to pat her hand, "let me help." Victoria's face lit up with gratitude and relief. Margaret Sterling squeezed my fingers with surprising strength, and that's when I knew I had them exactly where I wanted them. Because when I called the hospital that evening to ask about Margaret Sterling's treatment schedule, they told me something very interesting. "We don't have any patients by that name," the receptionist at Swedish Medical Center told me. "Are you sure about the spelling?" I tried variations: Margaret Sterling, Marguerite Sterling, Maggie Sterling. No records anywhere in the system. "Sir, I've checked our oncology department, our outpatient treatment center, and our emergency room admissions. No one named Margaret Sterling has received treatment here in the past 6 months." 20 minutes later, I had the same conversation with representatives from Virginia Mason, Harborview, and Seattle Children's. No Margaret Sterling. No cancer patient. No experimental treatments. Victoria's dying mother was as fake as Victoria's real name. Wednesday night, I called Marcus Bennett. "I need surveillance on a coffee shop meeting tomorrow," I said. "Pacific Coffee Roasters, Pine Street. I want photos of everyone involved, license plates, anything you can get." "What are you walking into?" "A $50,000 con job, but I need evidence before I make my next move." Thursday's meeting played out exactly as I expected. Margaret Sterling, devoted mother, brave cancer fighter, grateful for any help with medical expenses. Victoria, concerned daughter, trying not to burden anyone but secretly hoping for assistance. Me, grieving father-in-law, touched by their courage and ready to write a check. Except for one small detail they didn't plan on. While Margaret was describing her treatment schedule, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I walked to the parking lot and took a photo of their license plate, Washington State registration, but registered to a Maria Gonzalez in Tacoma. Back at the table, I made my offer. "I want to help with the medical bills," I said. "What do you need immediately?" Victoria started to protest. We couldn't accept such generosity. It was too much. They'd find another way. But Margaret cut her off. $50,000 would cover the next round of treatments, she said. "But we couldn't possibly accept—" "Yes, you can. Ryan would want me to help his family." I watched Victoria's face carefully as I said it. Watched the relief, the calculation, the predatory satisfaction she couldn't quite hide. "How would you like to handle the payment?" I asked. Cash would be easiest," Margaret said. "The clinic prefers immediate payment for experimental treatments." Of course they did, because cash transactions don't leave paper trails. Cash doesn't trigger bank reporting requirements. Cash disappears the moment it changes hands. "I can have it for you tomorrow," I said, "but there's a problem." Both women leaned forward. "With my accounts frozen, I can't access that much cash right away. I'd need to liquidate some assets, maybe sell my coin collection. That'll take a few days to arrange." The disappointment was visible, not grief, not concern for Margaret's health. Disappointment that the payday would be delayed. Of course, Victoria said quickly. We understand completely. Actually, I continued, there might be another option. I have some emergency cash at the house. Not 50,000, but maybe 20 or 25. Would that help with immediate expenses? Margaret's eyes lit up. 25,000 was still a substantial score. That would be wonderful, she said. Every bit helps. Perfect. Why don't you both come by tomorrow evening? I'll have everything ready. After they left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, waiting for Marcus to finish his surveillance. When he finally called, his voice was tight with anger. Grayson, you need to see these photos. We met at his office 30 minutes later. Marcus had been busy. Photos of Victoria and Margaret arriving separately, taken from 3 different angles. Photos of their license plates. Photos of them leaving together in Margaret's car. But the money shot was a picture taken with a telephoto lens through the coffee shop window. Margaret Sterling, cancer patient in need of $50,000 for experimental treatment, lifting a heavy camera bag over her shoulder while Victoria loaded medical equipment into the trunk. No oxygen tank, no wheelchair, no sign of the frail, dying woman I'd been talking to an hour earlier. There's more, Marcus said. I followed them after they left. They went to a storage unit in Renton, spent 40 minutes inside, came out with different clothes, different car. This is a professional operation. He handed me another photo. Victoria and Margaret in casual clothes, counting a thick stack of bills, next to a pile of medical props and costume pieces. How many people are in this network? I asked. At least 6. We've identified Margaret, Victoria, 2 men who serve as drivers and muscle, and a woman who plays various professional roles. Doctor, lawyer, social worker, whatever they need. They've been working the Pacific Northwest for at least 3 years. Why didn't anyone stop them? Same reason they'll get away with killing your son, unless we stop them. They're smart, patient, and they choose victims who won't be missed for a while. Elderly widowers, men who've isolated themselves after losing their wives. By the time anyone realizes what happened, the money's gone, and they've moved to a different state. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd killed my son before making sure they could access his inheritance. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Set up cameras around my house, inside and outside. I want everything recorded tomorrow night. What's happening tomorrow night? Margaret Sterling is going to try to kill me. Friday evening, I prepared for the performance of my life. 25,000 in cash, spread out on my kitchen table, doors unlocked, alarm system disarmed, will and insurance papers visible on the counter, everything a desperate con artist would need to stage another accidental death. At 7 p.m. exactly, Victoria and Margaret arrived. Dad, you didn't have to go to all this trouble, Victoria said, hugging me a little too tightly, staying a little too close. It's no trouble. Coffee? While I made coffee, Margaret admired my house, asked about insurance policies, property values, business succession plans. Normal conversation for a new friend, except for the way she was cataloging assets and evaluating security. This is more than generous, Victoria said when she saw the cash. Mom, what do you think? Will this cover the immediate expenses? It's perfect, Margaret said. But Grayson, we need to talk about your own health. Victoria mentioned you haven't been sleeping well since Ryan died. Here it comes, I thought. I have something that might help, Margaret continued, pulling a small bottle from her purse. Natural sleep aid, completely organic. 1 pill and you'll sleep like a baby. Victoria nodded enthusiastically. Mom's friend gave it to her during chemo. Really helps with stress and anxiety. I looked at the bottle. Unmarked pills, no prescription label, no manufacturer information. That's very thoughtful, I said. And then I did something that surprised them both. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Grayson Rogers at 4847 Bellevue Way. I have 2 women in my kitchen trying to poison me. Victoria's face went white. Margaret dropped the pill bottle, and 20 small white tablets scattered across my floor. Sir, did you say poison? Yes, the same way they killed my son. I have evidence, I have witnesses, and I need officers here immediately. Victoria moved toward the door, but I stepped into her path. Don't. I said. Marcus has been watching the house for 2 hours. His people are outside. You're not going anywhere. The 911 dispatcher was asking for more information, but Victoria was already on her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Within seconds, my phone rang. Mr. Rogers, this is David Patterson from Patterson Webb and Associates. I represent Victoria Sterling. I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'd never heard of David Patterson, but his voice was smooth, professional, authoritative, the kind of voice that convinced people to calm down, think rationally, avoid making mistakes they'd regret. There's no misunderstanding, I said. Your client killed my son. Mr. Rogers, I understand you're grieving, but these are very serious accusations. Accusations that could expose you to significant legal liability, defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're talking about potential damages in excess of $1 million. Victoria was nodding, encouraging her lawyer to continue. Margaret had recovered her composure and was looking appropriately shocked and hurt by my behavior. Furthermore, Patterson continued, Mrs. Sterling has documented evidence of erratic behavior on your part over the past week. Paranoid accusations, inappropriate surveillance, attempted financial manipulation. We're prepared to file for a restraining order first thing Monday morning. The police sirens were getting closer, but Patterson wasn't finished. However, Mrs. Sterling is willing to overlook this incident if you're willing to seek appropriate psychological help. Grief counseling, perhaps medication for anxiety and depression. We understand loss can affect judgment, and we don't want to see you destroy your reputation over a misunderstanding. It was masterfully done. Transform the victim into the aggressor, the evidence into paranoia, the rescue into a breakdown. Make me the problem. Make my accusations seem like the ravings of an unbalanced mind. Mr. Patterson, I said, are you actually a lawyer? Silence. Because I called the Washington State Bar Association this afternoon. There's no David Patterson registered to practice law in this state. There's no Patterson, Webb, and Associates anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. More silence. Just like there's no Margaret Sterling receiving cancer treatment at Swedish Medical Center. Just like there's no Victoria Sterling with a birth certificate or school records or employment history before 2019. The police arrived as I was talking. 2 officers, followed by Detective Sam Crawford, who'd been expecting my call. Mr. Rogers? The first officer looked around the kitchen, taking in the scattered pills, the cash on the table, the 2 women standing frozen by the door. You reported an attempted poisoning? Officer, this is a mistake, Victoria said, her voice calm and reasonable. My father-in-law has been struggling since his son's death. We're family friends trying to help him through a difficult time. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the door, Detective Crawford said. We're going to sort this out, but first, I need everyone to stay exactly where they are. Margaret spoke up, her voice weak and trembling. Officer, I'm a cancer patient. I just wanted to help him sleep. The pills are melatonin, nothing harmful. You can test them. We will, ma'am. We'll test everything. But I had more than pills. Detective Crawford, I said. Check your email. Marcus Bennett sent you a package 20 minutes ago. Crawford pulled out his phone, scrolled through his messages, opened an attachment. His expression changed as he read. Mr. Rogers, this says Mrs. Sterling has been married 4 times in the past 8 years. 4 different names, 4 different states. All 4 husbands died under suspicious circumstances, I said. All ruled natural causes. All left substantial inheritances. Victoria's lawyer voice came through my speaker again. Detective, this is David Patterson representing Mrs. Sterling. Any information Mr. Rogers has provided was obtained through illegal surveillance and invasion of privacy. None of it is admissible in court. Detective Crawford looked at my phone with interest. Mr. Patterson, are you currently licensed to practice law in Washington State? I'm consulting on this matter from California. I see. And what's your California bar number? Long pause. Too long. I'll need to call you back with that information. The line went dead. Crawford looked at Victoria. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. Driver's license, social security card, anything you have. Victoria handed over a Washington State license. Victoria Sterling, address matching Ryan's house. But when Crawford ran it through his system, his frown deepened. This license was issued in 2019, and do you have any identification older than that? I lost everything in a house fire. I had to start over with new documents. What city was the fire in? Hesitation. Sacramento. And the date? I don't remember exactly. It was very traumatic. Crawford looked at Margaret. And you are? Margaret Sterling, Victoria's mother. Can I see your ID? Margaret's purse was suddenly very interesting to her. I think I left it in the car. Which car is that? The blue Honda. Crawford looked out the window. Ma'am, there's no blue Honda in the driveway. That's when Margaret made her first real mistake. Instead of continuing the act, instead of playing confused or forgetful, she looked directly at Victoria with an expression that said, "We need to get out of here right now." Crawford caught it. 23 years as a detective, and he knew the look of co-conspirators realizing their scam was falling apart. Ladies, I'm going to ask you both to have a seat while we sort this out. But Victoria was already moving, not toward the door, that was blocked, but toward the kitchen counter where my financial documents were spread out, toward the legal papers that would tell her exactly how much she'd been trying to inherit. Actually, she said, her voice taking on a different tone entirely, I think there's been enough pretense for one night. She picked up my will, scanned the asset summary on the first page, and smiled. 2.6 million. That's quite a nest egg, Dad. The word dad sounded different now. Not affectionate, not grateful. Too bad you won't live long enough to enjoy it. Detective Crawford's hand moved toward his weapon, but I held up my hand. Wait, I said. I need her to keep talking. Because Victoria Sterling, or whatever her real name was, had just made a crucial admission in front of 2 police officers, and Washington State is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. The wire I was wearing had been recording everything for the past hour. Victoria, I said carefully, what do you mean I won't live long enough to enjoy it? She laughed, actually laughed. You really think you're smart, don't you? Setting up cameras, hiring investigators, playing detective. But you missed the most important thing. What's that? I wasn't planning to wait for you to die naturally. Crawford tensed, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. I needed more than threats. I needed confession. Just like you didn't wait for Ryan to die naturally? Ryan was getting too close. Started asking questions, poking around in places he didn't belong. Did you know he installed keylogger software on my computer? 2 months of watching everything I typed, every website I visited, every email I sent. My son. My brilliant, careful son. He found the others, didn't he? The other husbands. William in Phoenix, James in Vegas, Robert in Dallas. Smart boy, your son. Figured out the pattern, started building a case. Even contacted the police in 3 states, trying to get them to reopen investigations. Crawford was taking notes now, but Victoria didn't seem to care. The problem with smart boys, she continued, is they think they're smarter than everyone else. Ryan thought he could gather enough evidence to send me away without putting himself at risk. Thought he was safe because I loved him. You didn't love him. I don't love anyone. Love is a tool, just like grief, just like sympathy. You use it to get what you need, then you throw it away. But Margaret, or whoever she was edging toward the back door, but Detective Crawford positioned himself to block her path. How did you kill him? I asked. Arsenic. Small doses over 3 months, mixed into his coffee every morning. Creates symptoms that look like stress, fatigue, depression. By the time the doses get large enough to cause death, everyone's expecting it. Grieving spouse finds the body, calls 911, plays the devastated widow. Medical examiner sees a young man with a history of recent stress and rules it accidental death or natural causes. Except Ryan wasn't drinking coffee those last few weeks. No, he stopped drinking coffee, stopped eating my cooking, started bringing his own lunch to work. Paranoid little shit figured it out. Victoria's voice was getting harder, crueler. So I had to improvise. The garage. Carbon monoxide. Easier than you'd think. Knockout drug in his beer the night before, drag him to the car, start the engine. Another tragic accident. Young mechanic falls asleep in his car, engine running, garage door closed. Happens more often than you'd think. Crawford was recording everything on his phone now, but Victoria was too far gone to notice. The only problem was the inheritance structure. Ryan's will left everything to me, but your will leaves everything to him. With him dead, I needed you to update your beneficiary designations before I could collect. So you decided to marry me. 6 months of grieving together, bonding over shared loss, then a quiet wedding. Older man finds love again with his son's widow. Very romantic, very believable. And then what? Another accident? Car crash, icy roads, poor visibility, tragic ending to a beautiful love story. Except this time the grieving widow inherits $2.6 million instead of nothing. Detective Crawford stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands where I can see them." But Victoria wasn't finished. "You want to know the really funny part?" she said. "I was planning to let you live longer than the others. 6 months instead of 8 months. You seem like a nice man, and I was actually enjoying our conversations." How thoughtful. But then you had to go and play detective. Had to hire investigators and freeze accounts and ruin everything. So now you get to die tonight, just like Margaret's other sons. Margaret flinched. "Victoria, shut up." "Why? They already know everything. Might as well tell them about the others. Phoenix, Vegas, Dallas, Seattle. How many does that make, Mom? 15, 20. Crawford was calling for backup, but I needed one more thing. "Victoria," I said. "What's your real name?" She smiled. "Does it matter? By tomorrow I'll be someone else entirely." That's when I knew I had enough for a conviction. But I didn't know she was about to confess to something much worse. "You want to know my real name?" Victoria said, laughing at some private joke. "I haven't used my real name in so long I sometimes forget what it is. But I remember my first husband. Tommy Brennan, high school sweetheart, married when I was 19. Detective Crawford had backup on the way, but Victoria was in full confession mode now. 23 years of pent-up secrets spilling out all at once. Tommy was practice. Didn't know what I was doing yet. Used too much rat poison. Made him sick for weeks before he finally died. Messy, suspicious, nearly got caught. That's when I learned subtlety. "How many have there been?" Crawford asked. "Honestly, I stopped counting after 12, but Margaret can tell you exactly. She keeps records. Names, dates, amounts inherited. It's like a business ledger for her." Margaret looked like she wanted to disappear. "Victoria, stop talking." "Why? It's over anyway. This one," she gestured at me, "was supposed to be our retirement score, too. 6 million was enough to disappear for good. Maybe buy that place in Costa Rica we've been talking about." "We?" Crawford looked between them. "Margaret's not my mother," Victoria said. "She's my business partner. Has been for 8 years. I do the emotional manipulation. She handles the logistics. Fake documents, identity changes, medical emergencies. She's very good at playing whatever role the mark needs to see." Margaret finally spoke up. "You stupid girl. 40 years of careful work and you throw it all away for what? Because you're angry?" 40 years. Crawford stepped closer. "How long have you been doing this?" Margaret's silence was answer enough. "Since the 1980s, Victoria said. "Started with her own husband, then branched out. Taught me everything I know about reading men, about becoming what they need, about making them trust you completely before you take everything." The backup officers arrived, but Victoria kept talking. Ryan figured it out too late, just like the others. Found Margaret's real records, the ones she thought she'd destroyed. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates going back 40 years, 47 victims, if you're keeping score, 47 men, 47 families destroyed, 47 lives ended for money. The beautiful thing, Victoria continued, is that most of them were never investigated. Lonely widowers, men estranged from their families, guys who wouldn't be missed for months. By the time anyone realized they were dead, we were already working our next target in another state. Crawford was recording everything, but I still had questions. Why did you stay in Seattle after Ryan died? Why not disappear immediately? Because you were supposed to be easy. Grieving father, grateful for any connection to his dead son. I could have had your estate updated and married you within 3 months, but you had to be difficult. Then she walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the darkness. Do you know what the hardest part of this job is? It's not the killing. Poison is actually quite peaceful. They just go to sleep and don't wake up. It's not the acting either. After 47 performances, you get good at being whatever someone needs. What then? The waiting. Months of pretending to love someone, pretending to care about their stories and their problems and their stupid little lives. Do you know how boring most men are? How repetitive their dreams? How predictable their fears? Margaret was being handcuffed now, but Victoria didn't seem to notice. Ryan was different, though. Ryan was actually interesting. Smart, funny, creative. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, enjoying the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. Did you feel anything when you killed him? Victoria considered this seriously. Regret, not guilt. I don't feel guilt, but regret that I had to end something that was actually pleasant for once. You're a monster. I'm a businesswoman. Men have needs. Companionship, sex, someone to cook their meals and listen to their problems. I provide those services in exchange for financial compensation. The only difference between me and a regular wife is the timing of the payoff. Detective Crawford read Victoria her rights, while another officer secured Margaret. But Victoria had one more revelation. You should know, she said as the handcuffs clicked into place. Ryan tried to save you. Those last 2 weeks, he kept trying to warn you about me without tipping me off. Left you clues, breadcrumbs, anything he could think of. What kind of clues? The text message was just the beginning. Check his computer, his email, his browsing history. 2 solid months of evidence collection, including recordings of me talking to Margaret about our plans. Your son died trying to protect you. Where are the recordings? Victoria smiled one last time. That's for you to figure out. But I'll give you a hint. Ryan was very good with hidden files, and he knew you'd need more than just my confession to stop the others. What others? Did you really think we were the only ones? This is a network, Mr. Rogers. Franchised operation. Margaret trained 6 other teams over the years, taught them everything she taught me. We're just one cell in a much larger organization. The implications hit me like a freight train. 47 victims was just Margaret's team. If there were 6 other teams working for years, how many victims total? Crawford asked. Victoria shrugged. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Margaret's only been working the West Coast. Her protégés cover the rest of the country. As they led her toward the door, Victoria turned back one last time. Your son was a hero, Mr. Rogers. He died trying to save not just you, but everyone who would have come after you. That's when I knew Ryan had left me more than just a warning. He'd left me the tools to bring down the entire network. The FBI arrived at my house at 6 a.m. the next morning. Not local agents. This was the Financial Crimes Unit from Portland, led by Special Agent Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Rogers, we need to talk about your son's computer files. She spread a collection of USB drives across my kitchen table. 5 drives, each labeled with dates covering the last 2 years of Ryan's life. These were hidden in a safety deposit box your son rented under his middle name. Bank called us yesterday when Detective Crawford's investigation triggered their fraud alert system. Ryan's middle name was James, after his grandfather. I never knew he'd rented a safety deposit box. What's on them? 2 years of surveillance footage, financial records, recorded conversations, and detailed documentation of the largest elder fraud network we've ever encountered. Agent Mitchell opened her laptop and plugged in the first drive. Your son didn't just investigate Victoria Sterling. He infiltrated her entire operation. Look at this. The screen showed a video recording taken from what looked like a hidden camera. Victoria and Margaret in a hotel room, counting money and discussing their next target. But they weren't alone. 3 other women sat around the table, each with their own collection of documents and photographs. When did Ryan record this? 6 months ago. He'd been tracking their movements, following their communications, documenting their entire network. These women represent 5 different operational cells, working across 8 states. The recording continued, Victoria presenting a PowerPoint slide showing target demographics, success rates, optimal timing for various scenarios, like a business presentation for serial murder. According to your son's notes, Agent Mitchell continued, this network has been operating for over 20 years. Conservative estimate puts their victim count at over 200 men. 200 families destroyed. 200 lives stolen for money. Ryan documented everything. Bank records showing money transfers between cells, communication logs proving coordination, surveillance photos of team members using multiple identities. He built a RICO case that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. She pulled up another file. But here's the remarkable part. Your son wasn't working alone. The screen showed email exchanges between Ryan and Agent Mitchell herself. He contacted us 14 months ago with preliminary evidence about Victoria's background. We've been working together ever since, using him as an inside source while we built cases against the entire network. Ryan was working for the FBI? Unofficially. We couldn't offer him official protection. That would have blown his cover. But he was feeding us intelligence, helping us track the network's movements, identifying victims in other states. Why didn't he tell me? Because he knew they were planning to target you next. The only way to protect you was to maintain his cover until we had enough evidence to arrest everyone simultaneously. Agent Mitchell opened another drive. This is his final report, uploaded to our servers 3 days before he died. The document was titled Operation Lethal Inheritance, Final Intelligence Summary. 27 pages of detailed analysis, including a complete organizational chart of the network. Margaret Sterling, real name Margaret Kowalski, has been running this operation since 1983. She's trained 14 different women over the years, established cells in 12 states, developed protocols for identity creation, victim selection, asset liquidation, and elimination procedures. Methods for killing targets while avoiding detection. Your son documented 17 different techniques they've used, along with medical professionals who've been paid to falsify death certificates. The scope was staggering. Not just Victoria and Margaret, but doctors, lawyers, coroners, insurance investigators, an entire network of people profiting from systematic murder. The beautiful thing about your son's work, Agent Mitchell said, is that he didn't just gather evidence. He gathered intelligence. Bank account numbers, communication protocols, safe house addresses, planned target lists for the next 2 years. How many arrests? We executed simultaneous raids in 8 states this morning. 43 arrests so far, including 5 ringleaders. We expect to make another 20 arrests by the end of the week. Agent Mitchell closed the laptop and looked at me directly. Mr. Rogers, your son died a hero. His work will save hundreds of lives and bring justice to hundreds of families who never got it. But I had one more question. Did Ryan know they were going to kill him? Yes, his final upload included a message for you. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Ryan's handwriting. He wanted you to know that protecting you was worth everything. Ryan's letter was 3 pages long, but the ending is what I'll remember forever. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them in time, but I hope I gathered enough evidence to stop them from hurting you or anyone else. The garage is yours to do whatever makes you happy. The house is yours to fill with whatever gives you peace. Don't let their poison destroy your faith in people. There are good ones out there, worth trusting. Love you always, Ryan P.S. Check the safety deposit box at First National. Box 447. The key is taped under your workbench. Victoria Sterling was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Margaret Kowalski received the same sentence. The other 41 network members received sentences ranging from 15 years to life, depending on their level of involvement. The FBI's final count: 218 confirmed victims over 22 years. $127 million stolen. Hundreds of families who finally got answers about deaths they'd never understood. Rogers, automotive still operates 6 days a week, but now we have a mission beyond fixing cars. The Ryan Rogers Community Center opened last year, a training program for veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Computer forensics, criminal justice, investigation techniques. We've graduated 43 people so far. I kept the house exactly as Anna decorated it. Some things are worth preserving unchanged. I never remarried. Probably never will. But I've learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone is a choice. Lonely is a wound. I chose alone, and it's given me peace. The money from Victoria's forfeited assets went into a scholarship fund for criminal justice students. Seems fitting that her victims' money should train the people who'll catch the next ones like her. Detective Crawford stops by every few months, updates me on cases that connected to Ryan's investigation. The network's tentacles reached further than anyone imagined. Insurance fraud in Florida, identity theft in Texas, elder abuse in Oregon. Ryan's evidence helped solve cold cases going back 15 years. People ask if I'm angry, if I want revenge. But anger is exhausting, and revenge doesn't bring anyone back. Justice brought me peace. Knowing that Ryan's work prevented hundreds of future murders brought me purpose. If this story sounds familiar, if someone in your life has changed dramatically overnight, if a new romantic partner seems too good to be true, trust your instincts. Check their background. Verify their stories. Ask hard questions. And remember, love doesn't ask you to change your will in the first month. Love doesn't pressure you about insurance policies. Love doesn't get impatient about inheritances. Real love protects. Real love waits. Real love tells the truth. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it. You might save a life. What state are you listening from? Because knowing your local laws might someday save your life too.